and family life in 1954, moving to the Vamsi Gopalji Temple at Vrindavan's Keshi Ghat in 1956, and accepting the renounced order of life in 1959. He had conceived of his multi-volume presentation of Srimad Bhagavatam. He traveled from Delhi, beginning the work on his magnum opus in the Chippi-Wada district in Delhi, where he had been given a room at a Radha Krishna temple by an acquaintance, Krishna Pandit. In 1960, he moved into his tiny quarters at the famous Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, where he would reside for nearly a decade, publishing and distributing Bhakti Godhead and preparing his Srimad Bhagavatam purports and a series of other writings. There he incubated his plan to carry out the request of his spiritual master that had been made to him and write and preach in English and take Krishna consciousness to the West. Print books. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's request was not new, for book printing and distributing has always been the family business of the Brahma and Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote over 100 books, and before him, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, on the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, had published hundreds of books. In fact, most great Vaishnava spiritual masters have made literary contributions. Mahaprabhu himself had rediscovered and then with his own hand distributed copies of Sri Brahma Samhita and Sri Krishna Karnamrita to his closest disciples. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, to highlight the prominence of literature in his Gaudiya Math mission, included an image of the printing press in its logo, and often preached that distributing books was better than building opulent temples. Passing on the tradition of the previous great teachers of pure devotional service, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur personally told our Srila Prabhupada that if he ever got money, he should print books. Srila Prabhupada begins publishing. In Jhansi, before Srila Prabhupada had gone to Vrindavan, he had founded the League of Devotees, an organization meant to re-spiritualize human society. And at the request of a godbrother, he had worked on the magazine Sanjana Toshani. Neither of these projects worked out the way Srila Prabhupada had wanted, but both reveal his ambitious vision. When he was handed the Sanjana Toshani project, for example, it was a simple publication with a small circulation. He soon developed a plan to expand it into a world-class publication, as popular and polished as India's Illustrated Weekly. But the godbrother who had asked for his help, overwhelmed by Srila Prabhupada's enterprising approach, released him from the project. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 12, entitled Ritasura's Glorious Death. And we're on text 13. Ayu Shri Kirta Aishvaryam. Ayu Shri Kirta Aishvaryam. Ashisha Purushasha Ya Ashisha Purushasha Ya Bhavanti Eva Hi Tat Kale Bhavanti Eva Hi Tat Kale Yatanicho Viparyayo Yatanicho Viparyaya Ayushri Kirtita Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushashya Bhavantyeva Hi Tatkale Yatanicho Viparyaya Ayoshri Kirta Aishvarya Ashishya Purushashya Bhavanyeva Hi Tatkale Yatanicho Viparyaya Ayoshri Kirta Aishvarya Ashishya Purushashya Bhavanyeva Hi Tatkale Yatanicho Viparyaya Ayushiketa Ashvarya Shishya Purushashya Vanchiva Hitatkali Ayushiketa Ashvarya Purushashya Vanchiva Hitatkali Itanichori Paryaya Ayum, longevity. Shri, opulence. Kirti, fame. Aishvaryam, power. Ashisha, benedictions. Purushasha, of the living entity. Yaha, which. Bhavanti, arise. Eva, indeed. He, certainly. Tatkale, at the proper time. Yata, just as. Anicho, of one not desiring. Viparyaya, reverse conditions. Translation: just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, opulence, fame, and everything else at the time of death, so at the appointed time of victory, one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by his mercy. Responsibly, please. Just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, opulence, fame, and everything else at the time of death. So at the appointed time of victory, one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by his mercy. It is not good to be falsely puffed up, saying that by one's own effort one has become opulent, learned, beautiful, and so on. All such good fortune is achieved through the mercy of the Lord. From another point of view, no one wants to die, and no one wants to be poor or ugly. Therefore, why does the living entity, against his will, receive such unwanted troubles? It is due to the mercy or chastisement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one gains or loses everything material. No one is independent, everyone is dependent on the mercy or chastisement of the Supreme Lord. There is a common saying in Bengal that the Lord has 10 hands. This means he has control over everywhere, in the 8 directions and up and down. If he wants to take everything away from us with his 10 hands, we cannot protect anything with our own 2 hands. Similarly, if he wants to bestow benedictions upon us with his 10 hands, we cannot factually receive them all with our 2 hands. In other words, the benedictions exceed our ambitions. The conclusion is that even though we do not wish to be separated from our possessions, sometimes the Lord forcibly takes them away from us. And sometimes he showers such benedictions upon us that we are unable to receive them all. Therefore, either in opulence or in distress, we are not independent. Everything is dependent on the sweet will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Jnana Timiranda Shagananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Swabadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikapatarubhishya, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, Paritanam, Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. So, Srila Prabhupada makes a very nice point right at the beginning of the purport. He says, we shouldn't become falsely puffed up, saying it's our own effort that we become opulent, learned, beautiful, and so on. And there's a devotee right now, Adhoksaja, and he holds the record for distributing 2,000 books in one day on the street. 4,000 books. So we were just trying to work it out. 4,000 books. So let's say he spends 10 hours, maybe it's a bit more, maybe it's a bit less. So if it's 10 hours on the street and it's 4,000, then how many books an hour? 400 an hour. 400 books an hour. I mean, I'd like to just see that, actually, to see that happen, And so 400 books an hour. So how many people does he have to stop, and how many books do they have to take in an hour? Because it's gonna be difficult to stop 400 people in an hour, get them all to take a book. 6 books a minute. So it's not going to be easy to do that. So that means, and what's the set of books he's doing? Is he doing sets of 30? 7. So he's doing sets of 7 and sets of Bhagavatams. And in the Bhagavatam is what? Is this book points or actual books? 4,000? 4,000 books, yeah. Imagine if someone had done that in Srila Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada was over the moon when the devotees first did 100 books, Gauri Devi Das was one of the first to do it. Srila Prabhupada was so happy, And when they initially started, they did one Krishna book at a gas station, swapped it for the air fuel, and that was like huge, it was like amazing, because they had all these big books, and they weren't getting distributed. And they were just mounting up and mounting up. And then they had one technique was sell, this is Tamal Krishna Goswami asked Srila Prabhupada, well, maybe we can sell incense, because the Prophet's good on incense then. Every time you do a few packets of incense, you can hand out the next big book because you've covered the cost, So they were doing maybe 20, 30 a day. Imagine if they'd gone back and said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, one of the devotees did 4,000 books today. Phenomenal, eh? So interestingly enough, and I've seen a video by Mahotsav Prabhu, and he comes over very, very down to earth, very unassuming, and that's the real technique: is can you do huge and not be falsely puffed up? Can you be fully aware that it's only because of the Lord's mercy that you've been able to do this? If you can, then you're eligible to continue on doing it. If you're not, then there's a good chance Krishna will take away the result just to protect you, and maybe also protect devotees that you may offend, by considering yourself better than they are. So the result is nice, but behind the result is the attitude of the devotee, which is even more important, that he's not falsely puffed up, and that he's eager and he's enthusiastic. And if he's these two things, then irrespective of the result, he'll be able to continue on distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. Because if you spend all day being eager and enthusiastic, then you have a very enjoyable day. And then if the books go out, that's an extra. And if they don't go out, okay, no problem, there's always tomorrow. I can try again, So we need to focus on the attitude rather than the result. Because the result will definitely come in due course of time, just like with Srila Prabhupada, no result. And at the age of 70, so imagine being out there on Buchanan Street till you're 70 before it starts happening. You maybe get the odd glimpse here and there, but you're like, no, I'm going to stick with this. I know I'll get there in the end, And then suddenly at 70, you start doing 4,000 books a day. Yeah. I'm convinced actually that if any devotee did continue until that time, no matter what his result was, by the time he was 70, he'd be doing pretty big. So are we in it for the long haul? Krishna consciousness takes a lifetime, and learning the art of practicing Krishna consciousness, learning the art of how to associate with devotees, actually, because what's underneath everything is the 6 living exchanges that are going on between the devotees. And we do the book distribution, we peel the potatoes, we build the temples, we fix the cars, we do everything. But the framework underneath it all, the success really, the column that you'll see on the marathon score is how many living relationships you have with devotees. And that's if you can have at least 1 or 2, then that's the real result, the real score. So this false ego is what causes all the problems. There's a book by Buddhism Chapa, and he says the mind is in the mode of goodness. It's like a cow. So you can take a cow anywhere. You can walk it over and say, let's eat eat this grass over here, and then you can just say to the cow, we're going to go over here, now you can eat the grass there. And the cow's like, okay. So the cow's just like, what's the program? And you say, the cow, we're going to chant Hare Krishna. And the cow's like, okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Okay, it's not a problem. But then what comes along is the false ego. And the false ego interferes. It says, do you remember what that person said to you yesterday? I mean, who does he think he is, He's only been in the movement half an hour more than you have. Who does he think he is? Doesn't he understand who you are? And then the false ego brings the mind in, and then the mind brings in the intelligence. The intelligence starts to scheme. It's in the mode of passion. False ego is in the mode of ignorance. And then the mind, which is in the mode of goodness, becomes derailed, and off it goes down the wrong track. So imagine if you could chant without any false ego, that you could just go before the Lord with no agenda, no devious attitude, no conniving or skiving or swerving instead of serving. And you could just go before the Lord with a completely honest heart and say, I just want to engage in your loving service. And all I want is pure love of you. So that's at that point, we'll know the false ego is gone for good. So that's when it disturbs everything. So here, good fortune is achieved through the mercy of the Lord. And from another point of view, no one wants to die, and no one wants to be poor or ugly. Therefore, why does the living entity, against his will, receive such unwanted troubles? It is due again to the mercy or the chastisement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's a famous verse that's considered the essential verse of all our Vedic philosophy is Tatenukam Pam Shukshamano. That whatever is happening to you, though it may seem like chastisement, or it may seem like mercy, or it may seem really good, or it may seem really bad, if you can always be in the mindset that this is the special mercy of the Lord, and I just have to learn to appreciate. Sometimes the mercy of the Lord is an acquired taste. Sometimes the mercy of the Lord is something we appreciate in hindsight. But still, the bottom line is, Krishna consciousness really means appreciating the mercy of the Lord. In the early days, they had this idea that being Krishna conscious meant that wherever you looked, you saw Krishna. And so this devotee made this headband, and he put a car aerial on it. And at the end of the car aerial was a picture of Krishna. And wherever he looked, all he could see was Krishna. So he thought, that can be Krishna conscious. But Krishna consciousness isn't quite that easy, actually. It's more what's going on in the heart. Do you fully appreciate 100% that what's happening to you right now, the circumstances you're in, the devotees you're associating with, the service you've been given, the part of the country that you're in, these are all the special mercy of the Lord. There's a nice letter by Srila Prabhupada, and he's saying, this is the art of Krishna consciousness. This is the secret. Can you appreciate that what's happening to you right now is the mercy of the Lord? And he says, try to understand that whenever you have any difficulty with devotees, that is your lack of Krishna consciousness and not theirs. Is this clear? So Srila Prabhupada always brought it back to the responsibility of the person to be able to see and appreciate that there is the mercy of the Lord. Confirmed by the man with the bell. Thank you. So that's why we study the books. That's why we try to become clear in the philosophy, because it can be a challenge at times, appreciating how it is our lack of Krishna consciousness and it is special mercy that we're in the situation that we're in. So Prabhupada's again making the point, no one is independent, everyone is dependent on the mercy or the chastisement of the Lord. So that's interesting also that we're dependent upon the chastisement. So we don't get chastisement unless we need it. So we're also dependent upon it. Although we may feel like this chastisement is not needed, and it's not appreciated, and it's not appropriate, then that means we're just misunderstanding, because we are dependent upon both the mercy and the chastisement of the Supreme Lord. There's a common saying in Bengal, the Lord has 10 hands, so then Prabhupada's going on to say, when the Lord decides to take from you, with your 2 hands, what can you hold? And if the Lord decides to give to you, with your 2 hands, what can you take? And Srila Prabhupada was very much like that with the success of his international society in just a decade. So much was achieved, and it exceeded his ambitions. The conclusion is that we do not wish to be separated from our possessions, but sometimes the Lord forcibly takes them away from us, and sometimes he showers such benedictions. So I've been reading just now in the 5th canto, Bali Maharaj. He was given all kinds of opulence, but Srila Prabhupada makes the point in quite a few purports, 4 or 5 purports, he keeps saying the same thing, that the real mercy of the Lord wasn't that he showered Bali Maharaj with opulence, but it was that he showered Bali Maharaj with love of God. He gave him pure love of God. So it's only if Krishna wants to do that. And then once the devotee has that, whether he has material opulence or he doesn't, and Bali Maharaj makes this beautiful prayer. When he gets punished, he gets thrown into a cave, and he's lying in the cave and he's saying, Indra approached the Lord to get back all his possessions, but I got the real mercy because I had them all taken off me, but I got the shelter of the Lord. So same as Ritasora, Indra again, same problem. He's interested in the externals, and Ritasora is interested in the consciousness. He's interested that he can be absorbed in loving, and obviously he's experiencing the Lord is reciprocating, yayatamam prapadyante. As he surrenders, the Lord is rewarding accordingly. So both Ritasura and Bali Maharaj were happy, although it looked externally like they were in a downtrodden condition and things were all wrong and bad for them. But the Lord awakened within their heart that appreciation that this is my special mercy. This chastisement is my special mercy. So that's what we should be looking for, that how can I develop the consciousness that when the Lord does chastise me, that I'm able to appreciate that that is also his love for me, his loving hand. Any questions or comments?
Some people would see the mercy of the Lord in one way and the chastisement in another way, and yet some may see them both as mercy. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that, about the perception of how these are seen by different people.
Yeah, well, that's what the story. That's what's interesting about the story, isn't it? Both of them are happy. Indra is happy, and Vritasura is happy. They both feel like they're getting the mercy of the Lord, and we're able to compare it and say, okay, so Indra gets his kingdom. He gets the lifetime of Manvantara is 70 odd cycles of the yugas, isn't it? I was just reading that this morning. So many millions of years, and then the demigods have to get shuffled around. So they're thinking that is mercy. But from the eternal point of view, it's just a fraction of time, very, very fleeting. And both Ritasura and Bali Maharaj are saying, we are so fortunate because the benefit we're getting is eternal benefit. So depending on what you're looking for, you'll get what you're looking for. So you'll be thinking, well, the Lord's been really kind to me. He helped me to win the lottery, and now I have £100 million, and I'm so happy. And I'm 50 years old, so I've got 20 years. This isn't the money. And then somebody else doesn't win the lottery because he doesn't gamble in the first place, and he also he lives till he's 70, but he's Krishna conscious at the time of death, and he leaves the material world behind once and for all. So sometimes we have to recalibrate our method of assessing what is mercy and what isn't mercy. If we're thinking mercy is just that I'm really comfortable and it's a really cozy situation, and everything's fine, and I really have the mercy of the Lord, then you may not actually really have the mercy of the Lord at all. Like Srila Prabhupada, he went out to do something that none of his godbrothers would do. And it could seem that they had the mercy of the Lord because they had their mats and they're part of the Gaudiya mission that they were dealing with. And Srila Prabhupada was going, one of his godbrothers referred to him as ludicrous. It was ludicrous what he was trying to do. Srila Prabhupada replied back very sternly, it is never ludicrous to try to follow the order of the spiritual master. So then we see later what seemed to be not the mercy of the Lord turned out to be really the real mercy of the Lord, So sometimes we get the mercy in a seed form, which means it's potentially going to be something very significant. And in the seed form, we have to be patient because a bamboo doesn't grow for the first few years. Hardly anything happens, and then suddenly it shoots up, overnight, like 20 feet in the air. But it's spread a huge network of roots into the ground when it seemingly was doing nothing. So it may seem like you're not getting very far in your book distribution, or it may seem like you're not getting very far in your project that you're doing to spread Krishna consciousness, or whatever it is you're doing, growing sprouts, whatever it is. But if you just persevere with enthusiasm and eagerness, then all success will be there. Well, the real success will be there, whether that manifests externally. In Srimad case, it was very much both, wasn't it? Yeah.
Good to understand this idea of perhaps getting material benedictions or a nice circumstance is not actually the full mercy of the Lord, but then we see perhaps in our own lives that we're getting this sort of mercy. Is it to understand that maybe Krishna knows we're not capable of getting the other form of mercy? We don't have a taste for it yet, or is somehow we have to? If you say everything is the mercy of the Lord, but it seems like some mercy is better,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, when the first time we went over to India, we were in Mayapur, and the Russian devotees were there, and I'd heard so much about what they'd been through, and I was really in awe and reverence of them. I gave one of them my one and only woolen chudda at the time, my prized possession. But I was just so overawed by what they'd been through, to spread Krishna consciousness. So a devotee was explaining to me that, and I saw this actually. I saw we had one Russian boy that came on the farm for a while, because he wasn't a devotee, he was just like a volunteer. But when he was exposed to the rampant opportunities for sense gratification in the West, I remember seeing him in Glasgow. He had a pair of Bermuda trousers on, and he was intoxicated on something, and he was like going full swing for sense gratification. It was just irresistible for him, And the devotee was explaining to me, he said, well, the Russian devotees, Krishna has put them there because they're very tough, and in that type of situation, that's what's suited for them to spread the Krishna consciousness, achieve their own Krishna consciousness. And for us, we wouldn't last 5 minutes there, but in the same way, if they were exposed, certainly, anyway, the potential is there, that because sense gratification is so easily available in the West, so Krishna puts his devotee in situations. And Srila Prabhupada said, my spiritual master sent you to assist me. Srila Prabhupada saw it like that. He didn't just see them as malechas and degraded and fallen, but he saw them as special souls that had been put into that situation to then be able to show that even if you've done all these things, you can be very enthusiastic in Krishna consciousness, and you can achieve all kinds of significant things. So sometimes the only way you're going to know that is by sustained, confident endeavor over a long period of time, and then you're able to appreciate it. It may not be something that you're immediately able to appreciate. And that's why patience is such a virtue, because patience affords you the opulence of hindsight. Whereas a person is very passionate, he doesn't wait around to be able to see the same thing in hindsight. He's gone, he's off, he's doing something else. So just by persevering, eventually what you're going through, you'll be able to reflect back on hindsight. And in hindsight, it's a lot clearer what's going on and how it was the mercy, or how you missed getting the mercy, just depending on how you reacted to the situation, So you're just by continuing on, even when it is unclear or a little murky. Shishikori Taimai Pashashi Ki Jai, Shitosinath Maharaj Ki Jai, Shi Kirit Harilal Ki Jai, Shi Nrsimhadev Bhagavan Ki Jai. Sometimes a devotee may take up Krishna consciousness, but he may have a hidden agenda that he didn't realize it was going to be this difficult, and therefore he would like to be able to be excused from practicing Krishna consciousness now, but he just needs a really good excuse. So Krishna can do that as well. He can provide that. If you want to give up devotional service in Krishna consciousness, then Krishna can arrange for it so that you can have a really good excuse to give it up, if that's really what your agenda is, if you don't really want to do it, you see. Because Krishna doesn't want anybody doing anything involuntarily. So if you find yourself doing something begrudgingly and you don't really appreciate it, then Krishna's like, well, that's a problem to me as well, because I don't want you rendering this involuntary begrudging service. I can see you're unhappy. It's making me unhappy. Better you go and just enjoy yourself then, if that's what you need to do. So here you go, here's a good excuse. Now you can give up with a clear conscience. So it's a question also of how sincere we are. And sincere is a bit scary because it means free from wax, and it's referring to a lump of marble that doesn't have a crack in it. So you may look at your lump of marble and think, well, this has a lot of cracks in it. So how am I going to become sincere? So that's my question to you. Anyone like to answer that? How does a cracked piece of marble become uncracked? By repairing it? Possibly. Could be one answer, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you could say that the soul is never cracked. It is by nature sincere. But because we're not identifying with the soul, we're identifying with the covering, and the covering may be cracked. The false ego may be cracked. So then we have to go deep. We have to dig deeper. So if we're thinking, I don't really feel like doing this. I don't really feel like following the principles. I don't really feel like getting up in the morning. I really don't feel like standing out today for 8 hours. Then that's the cracked false ego we're identifying with. But the soul would love to do it. For the soul, there would be nothing nicer than to embrace in an opportunity to surrender and show its love for Krishna. Its origin and supreme abode. So we'd have to dig deep, dig down through the cracks to touch the soul, which isn't cracked. It's referred to in the Upanishad as the soul is like the image of the sun. It's very, very bright and powerful and effulgent. That's the soul. The good soul is there underneath everything, you know. So can we connect with that? Can we do it? That's why chanting is really important, that we chant from the heart and not from the mental platform. That we chant, that the soul gets involved rather than just some kind of superficial mental thing going on, you know. As Kadama Maharaj says, chanting is never casual. It is the core activity. Which is, you know, if you think of the core is like, there's no cracks in the core. So if we find ourselves being insincere, then we're misidentifying with the false ego. And we have to go deeper to connect with our sincerity. And also, one devotee was asking, well, how can I be more humble? And you know, you can't just like go around sniveling on the ground and please, Prabhu, could you wipe your shoes on me? And Prabhu, could you just give me a kick on the way out, please? And just, you know, throw some of your remnants my way, you know. But this whole concept of humility was being discussed, which is really, you know, a sincere devotee is naturally humble. And his conclusion was that you need to pray harder. The harder you pray, the more humble you must be, because you're only going to pray if you feel dependent. And if you're feeling dependent, then you'll be praying like anything, you know. So that's how a humble person sees problems. He sees, okay, I have to depend upon the Lord. He's desperate. They say the human condition is a desperate one. Just the nature. Well, if you look at the material world, everyone that's in the material world is desperate. From the little sparrow right through to Lord Brahma. Everyone is desperate. That's the condition, being in the material world. So rather than pretend you're not, by using your false ego or getting intoxicated, it's better to just connect with your real, sincere nature, which is I'm desperate for, and I'm so dependent upon the mercy of the Lord. I need His help. I need His guidance, and that's the reality. They say being humble just means being real. Just becoming aware that you're an insignificant, tiny fraction of consciousness, bound up in a body that's being completely controlled by the three modes of material nature, and you're trying to get out, and it's only by the Lord's mercy. Ainanda, Tunus Kinkaram, please. Somehow or other I've fallen into the situation. Pick me up, place me as an atom. At Lotus' feet. So that's our core intention.
I thought I could share a very nice graphic example of someone who is humble or who was humble. Because sometimes we act humble, but when we're put to the test, then the humble veneer is revealed that underneath is not such a humble attitude. So I was at Govardhan, and I seen this young man doing parikram, Dandavat parikram. Everyone knows what Dandavat parikram is. So he was doing Dandavat parikram, and this cow came and stood on his back. It stepped on his back, and immediately he wasn't disturbed. Well, he was actually disturbed, but he was disturbed because we could see by his actions, it spoke volumes, that he was disturbed, thinking that he was an inconvenience to the cow. The cow is a resident of the dam, and he was getting in the way of the cow, and he got up and he was doing like this to the cow. Automatically. He didn't have to adjust his false ego or anything, just immediately he was humble. So I think that's a really good example of someone who was certainly put to the test and the humility veneer didn't come off, and who really accepts the mercy of the Lord. And in different ways, perhaps we are tested like that too. We get, and then the chances there, it's an opportunity. If we're not humble, then the chance is to try to become humble.
Sometimes we have to guard our humility as well, because Rupa Goswami explains that we can mentally be humble to devotees in the mind that are chanting, and we can be formally humble to devotees that are fully engaged in worshipping the deity. But the devotees that we're open-hearted and completely humble with are only those that are completely free from the propensity to criticize others. So he's saying, be guarded with your humility, because if you're humble and open-hearted to the wrong person, then that can also be catastrophic. So, and you can see that with, we went round to Shri Ramraj in Vrindavan, because Balabhadra Prabhu had asked us to take his socks off and touch them to our heads. And we came in and he was looking at us and he goes, okay guys, what's up, And then we just attacked him. We just turned him upside down, pulled his socks off. And I was thinking, we're going to get, Shri Raj is going to cream us for this, but because we'd been told to do it by our spiritual master, so we were doing it. And he just went completely relaxed. And he just let us turn him upside down and pull his socks off. And then he says, oh, you finished now? And then I thought, wow, he's actually really humble. He's playing this part for authority to get things done. But when you attack him to pull his socks off, he's like, okay, do what you have to do. So humility is something that we maybe have to hide sometimes. And then we express it in the association of those that we can trust to be humble with. And otherwise we can be respectful mentally or corporally with the body, but then internally with the heart. That's reserved for special devotees. Jai. Iskon Guru Vrinda ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Go Premanandi. Bolo. All of you.